I don't know, just like really quickly, should we just, I mean, obviously I sent an email around saying who everybody was, and we're waiting for Helen still. But I thought we could quickly fly just through that, not like a, like I would normally do a 2-minute intro, but just a really quick who we are. So if you wanted to go around, I mean, Ben's first person next to me, if you wanted to go for it.
Yeah, no problem. Cheers, Russ. So morning, everybody. Nice to be part of this today. Pretty excited about it. I think it'll be a good discussion. I've met a few of you privately. For those of you that don't know me, I am the MD of wellbeing. We're an employee benefits software that basically does physical and mental well-being, and it does it in a kind of a unique way with artificial intelligence and things like that.
Cool. Kelly, do you want to go for it?
Hi, I'm Kelly. I run HR Stars, so we're a HR consultancy and we focus on employee engagement, so well-being is a massive part of that for us.
And Jen?
Hi everyone, I'm Jen. I'm a nutritional therapist working in the corporate sector, helping employees look after their well-being and companies look after their employees' well-being through simple nutritional changes.
Amazing. And Sarah?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Townsend. I consider myself to be a veteran home worker. I've done it for 21 years, believe it or not, running my own business as a marketing copywriter, and I'm also the author of a best-selling book, Survival Skills for Freelancers.
Which is great, and everyone should get a copy of that. Hey Tara, and just a really quick intro before we let the floodgates open.
Yeah. I'm Tara, I am a chiropractor. I am the clinic director as well of the clinic. My specialty is back pain and helping people understand and prevent back pain from reoccurring. So that's where I'm really geeky at.
And I've been treated by Tara many times and definitely vouch for it if you do need a chiropractor. Just wait, Helen's got, I think you saw she's got an audio issue.
Based?
Oh.
I'm based in Stroud, so I'm based on the High Street. So opposite Andrews, the estate agent.
Okay.
You can't miss us once you know where we are.
Oh, Louise, I should have said, did you want to do an intro as you're going to be keeping control of us and whatnot?
Yeah, Louise.
Yeah. So I'm Louise Taylor of Taylor Made Business Services, which I should put on. I'm helping Jill and Pete with the business show and Neil and everybody. So I am just hosting this Zoom session so we can so what'll happen, I think once I start letting everyone in, I'll sort of go through a bit of the Zoom chat rules, and then I'll pass over to Russ to do your bit first.
Rapidly send it down a hill.
Recorded now, so that's fun.
Awesome.
And I think we're still waiting for Helen, weren't we?
Yeah, she said she's having an audio issue she's trying to sort out.
Right, we've got...
But Helen's director of UNI Wellbeing, I think UNI Wellbeing, which is mental health. There you go. Hi Helen.
Hello, Helen.
Hey.
Right.
Do you just want to really quickly do a bit of an intro of just like a 20 seconds of
now,
we've got to start let the floodgates open up. Helen, it's UNI, isn't it? Your business, and it's all focused on employee mental health and wellbeing. Yeah. Great. Sorry, it's a bit rushed. So yeah, do you want to open the floodgates and we'll crack on?
Yeah. There's 6 at the moment. So it's
okay.
Not too bad.
No.
Because it's getting 9 o'clock.
Louise, just out of interest, does it get put somewhere for people to watch as a replay after?
Yes, it will. Yes.
So be careful what you say.
They've sorted it all out. After, getting the bits out of us chatting before and the end, it'll go live. Yeah. Right. I'm letting everybody in. This is right. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
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 How's everyone today? Hopefully we've just got people turning up.
Good morning.
Quite a few familiar faces from this morning's breakfast meeting already, so that's good.
Sick of the sight of each other, aren't we?
Never, Neil.
I know, exactly. Hi Sarah, how are you, okay?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. A bit zoomed out already, but yeah, got a long way to go this next 2 days, but yeah.
Does anyone know of a Hannah Hockley? I don't recognise her name. Her name is not on my...
Yeah, she's works at Cirencester College.
Okay. So,
Definitely let Hannah in, yeah.
okay. I've been told not to let anyone in if they're not violent.
You have to make an exception for Hannah, that's for sure.
Do we? Okay, well. And David Allen is here. That's good. And Christina, there we go, I recognise her name. So, we have a good turnout. So there are a couple more people who are meant to be turning up, but as soon as it's 9:02, I think we'll make a start. So just to go through the Zoom rules, if everyone could put themselves on mute if they're not talking. You have the chat box if you want to share details. Please feel free. And then if you've got any questions, I'll be monitoring the chat box. So once the panel have said their bit, if you've got any questions, we can pose them to the panel members. I think that's it. Over to you, Russ.
So this is where it rapidly goes downhill, I guess, guys. So apologies in advance. Basically, yeah, I'm just going to take through the panel discussion, just speaking about some of the particular topics around not just how employers can manage remote working and all the challenges that brings, but also from the self-employed perspective as well, because a lot of self-employed people will be facing very much of those same challenges, but on a very isolated basis as well. So it's equally important to really talk about that. So I guess the first thing I thought I would ask, because I've seen quite a lot of, well, obviously remote working for good or for bad. So I just wanted to get everyone's opinion on the panel if they think it's a good or bad thing, or indifferent, of course, could be either way. So without opening the floodgates, of course, I'll just go immediately to my right. And Ben, lucky you, it's you again. So I'll start with you. What do you think, good or bad?
Well, that's the question we all want to answer, isn't it? I think what summed it up really well for me and really succinctly, there's a journalist called Katie Paris. I don't know if anyone else saw this, but a week ago, she summed it up perfectly in my mind. She said, remote working, she said, the freedom, no commute, better coffee. And then she said, hang on, isolation, no commute, worse coffee. And I know that sounds really weird, but for me that's just summed it up, because actually everyone wants this very contrite answer of better or worse. And actually that depends on all these different mechanics. It depends on, like Russ has already alluded to, self-employed or employed. It depends on the individual's kind of working mechanics before this all hit. And I think it can be either. It's really what we design it to be, in my mind.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. Kelly, what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, just really following what Ben said, I totally agree. And I think it's something that, a few people were doing before we had to do it. And then I think, definitely we've seen from our clients, people forced then into that remote working. And initially it was like, this is fantastic. Like you say, no commute, like I can, literally finish work and be at home with, downstairs within seconds. But I feel, and from talking to clients, the longer that's gone on, actually people are now starting to struggle with the lack of, contact with people, actually like physical face-to-face contact. Actually, it's quite hard sometimes not having that separation between your home and your work environment as well, and some people quite liked a bit of a commute to be able to switch from one to the other. So I do think it depends on on the person, on the setup, and again how that's being managed by the employer as well.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, my lounge is currently half Pilates studio, so that's a really interesting challenge. Jen, what do you think? How are you finding it, and what do you think about good or bad?
Yeah, it's a really mixed bag. As everybody said, it really depends on the individual circumstances, whether they're set up, how supportive their employer's being, or if you're self-employed, suddenly needing to try and do everything remotely when you're used to being face-to-face with people is a really big challenge. I guess the positives about it are people are getting a little bit more time if they're not commuting to think about their well-being. So there's a good thing to come out of what 2020 has thrown at us, is that people are starting to pay a bit more attention to their well-being, hence talks like this happening. So that's the good part of it, I would hopefully say.
Yeah, definitely swings and roundabouts, isn't it? I think to a certain extent. Sarah, how do you find? You've done it for a long, long time, so obviously
Yeah,
you
I've
like
done it
it.
for over 20 years. But I have to say, even though I'm self-employed and I'm predominantly home-based, I'm used to working 5 days a week from the lounge bar in my gym. So even for me, it's had that kind of knock-on effect of meaning that I am still stuck at home every day. And the reason I first started working outside the home was because I found I was climbing the walls by the end of the day. And it's much easier to get distracted, to lose focus when you are surrounded by housework, chores, this sort of thing. So to echo what the guys have already said, yes, there's no commute, which is great for the environment, great for your petrol costs, great for the lack of headache caused by traffic chaos on the school run or whatever. But without having that kind of that sort of delineation between work time and home time, you're practically you're kind of losing that time for decompression time to kind of adjust from work time to home time, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, definitely, that's huge actually. I totally agree. Sorry, I guess you've been having to drag yourself into the clinic most days, but obviously with being a chiropractor and the clinic director, I guess you've got some challenges with looking after your guys who typically be quite hands-on with clients.
It's been really interesting. So I've been, particularly this week, since you invited me on the panel, I've been talking to a lot of my patients about it. And there's been a real mixed bag. For me personally, when I heard, working from home is going to be the new norm, I kind of took it more positive. I thought, great, people are going to be moving more. We're going to be in our own home environment. We'll be a little less stressed. But actually, people are actually more sedentary than they've ever been. So that little bit of conversation we used to have with our colleagues, walking around town if we're town centre based, we're not seeing that anymore. And I actually do think maybe in the long run, we either need to have a mix for sure. That decompression time that Sarah said, I think is actually really important. And also with pain related as well, we see a big link in that. And me personally, I've seen an increase in people's stress and then sitting down too much, and also being in an environment where you can't escape, work and home life starts to kind of merge together. So for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I don't think we understand it fully yet, for me.
Yeah, I guess we don't fully understand the long-term implications of it. And I think that leads quite nicely into Helen, actually, because a few people mentioned that isolation and that sort of thing. And I'm aware of a couple of businesses who have kept their offices open purely for a handful of employees who need to go into the office, for their mental health. Likewise, I've heard of other businesses who are keeping their employees on the Zoom call for the entire day to keep an eye on them. So, and all of that would have a direct impact on that mental health. What are your thoughts, Helen?
Yeah, a lot of my comments have already been said. I think that the challenge is that it comes down to a choice, whether or not it suits you. People who are starting their own business, for example, recognise that a part of their work potentially is going to be working independently from other people. If you work in an office environment, you're going to be surrounded by other people. And there is a real distinct choice to be made over whether that suits you or not, whether you prefer being able to work from the comfort of your own home and whether that brings its own benefits, or actually you prefer that commute into your working environment because it gives you that thinking space and then it gives you that opportunity to meet with colleagues. And the challenge this time round is, with this lockdown, this one and the one previously, is that choice wasn't there. It was an enforced change. So you didn't have the opportunity to make a decision on whether you thought that was right for you. So you were potentially flung into a completely alien situation where juggling your mental health and your well-being perhaps became a priority, but perhaps took a dip as work became more integrated with your home life when you were working from your sofa or from your kitchen table and had your kids around you. All of a sudden work became home life, and that blur was ever increased. And I think, for many people, they would have struggled with being able to find that separation, being able to find those boundaries, and of course dealing with, loneliness and the impact of isolation.
Absolutely, and I think probably when you do look at it, there's never going to be a solution. Well, there will be a solution, I'm sure. There is a way of doing it, and it probably is balance. And you see a lot of the polls, which a few people have mentioned. It depends on your circumstances and preference. So many on LinkedIn, particularly, I've seen a hell of a lot of polls where people are saying, like for working from home, heart for working from the office, and something else for a combination of the two, or maybe it's how many days do you want to work in the office and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a focus on a huge variety from person to person, but a balance seems to be the most common thing that I've seen in my experience. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add to that, but I just feel like it's a huge challenge from employers. How do you manage this, really? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on how do you even begin to manage how you handle that as an employer.
I think it's about sort of talking to your teams, isn't it, to find out, from them what their circumstances, what their work from home setup is, how they're feeling about working from home, what challenges they may be facing, if it is their preference. And I think, certainly from my point of view, what I've seen with employers is this pandemic and everything that it's brought for employers has really focused that, your people are really important. They're going to be what, helps you survive, thrive through this as a business. And I think now taking a more sort of a sort of people first approach is where those employees are going to really benefit from that, whether, like I say, they are keeping in regular contact with their teams, finding out, what their preferences are and being able to accommodate that. So, we've got clients who, like, you said, kept the office open for those who want to have a bit of time in the office. They've gone to now sort of extended lengths of making sure the work from home setup is in place. That I think at first people were just, like you say, forced to working from home and doing it from their sofa, sort of grabbing a bit of space, whereas now I think the folks have been, okay, if you're going to be working from home for the foreseeable or for a majority of the time, we need to make sure that you've got the right setup in place. And then also, like I said, still having that opportunity for those who really want that contact with others or need that time out of their homes, that they've got somewhere they can go to be able to, like I say, have that balance for whichever works for them best.
Definitely, again, it comes to balance, doesn't it? I do realise, guys, that we, as the panel, didn't actually intro. So as we speak, if you just want to quickly, next time you speak, just mention very quickly sort of who you are and what your background is. So we did that for ourselves, but we didn't do that for the guys that are just watching. So the next kind of key point that I wanted to discuss. So did anybody want to add anything to what Kelly just mentioned there? Has anyone got anything to kind of really add to how any management, sort of from an employer's perspective, how they might manage the remote working aspect? If anybody wants to just raise your hand and chip in.
Yeah, I'm Jen, a nutritional therapist working with different businesses to support their employees' wellbeing through nutritional strategies. I was just going to add in to say I've been working with lots of different companies during lockdown and before it, and some of the people who have been working from home have said that they've struggled a bit when their managers have almost tried to micromanage them, where they almost haven't trusted the employee when they're working from home, and the employees already felt really quite stressed about trying to learn how to use Zoom and to be picking up the phone rather than just popping over to somebody's desk. And then when they've had their manager almost imply that they're just checking in on them all the time, that's added quite a lot of stress to the employees. So I think it's a case of really supporting them, but also maybe not adding that extra stress of trying to check in on them all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. And just to quickly add to that, I think that sort of then opens up the bigger issue that, there needs to be a trust thing. So I'm Kelly and I own an HR Star, and a big thing that we do is employee engagement. And a massive part of that is that trust and that open and honest relationship between employer and employee. And I think you're right, Jen. If there's no trust there, then I think that poses bigger questions for the employer and employee relationship as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ben, I think you wanted to jump in there as well.
Yeah, it's just sort of following on from the points that has already been mentioned. I think balance obviously is the word of the day. Everyone wants to throw the word balance out there. And we found it really interesting. So I'm Ben, by the way, I'm the MD of wellbeing. So we are an employee benefits software that is wellbeing focused, and it monitors it on smartwatches and things like that. But going back to the balance thing, our most searched term last month was panic attacks. And I found it really fascinating when we delved into the search relevance of that actually it was weighted far more primarily with the individuals that are still going into the office. The most searched term and content for people that are working from home was Kaizen, which some of you might know is about personal efficiency. And I just think we've got to be aware that with this balance that's come, there's obviously a cultural shift. And managers have just got to be really aware that the tools they were using before might not be as relevant as they once were to plug gaps and fix issues. We've just got to be forward thinking.
I think so, and the trust thing is huge because, I've worked, a long time ago, I've worked in roles where I felt like, the employees weren't trusted whatsoever to be able to kind of work their own devices. But then you've seen very large companies who would employ people in that same situation now completely trust their employees. Facebook, I think, put, in the first lockdown, quite early doors, Facebook put 1,000 workers into home working indefinitely. So that's quite a big move. Obviously, I'm sure there's a financial gain there in terms of not hiring office space anymore, which is a real financial benefit. But it is kind of a leap. And I guess if the culture in the business, which is obviously what a lot of us will be aware you need to change in a lot of businesses, is that they don't really overly entrust maybe their lower level employees, then it's a major issue as well. So they may be forcing them to still come into the office because it's not an option to remote work. It is a game. It's all about that balance. I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in from the panel at this stage. Helen, after you've unmuted, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, I think trust is a really important thing, and trust is really important when it comes to creating positive relationships. We need it in our personal relationships, but also with our business and the people that we're working around. So if we feel like we're not trusted by our employer, that can have real significant effects on things like anxiety, things like depression, where we have somebody that's overtly monitoring us to every inch. It can make us feel constantly on edge and constantly feeling pressured and stressed. So that in itself can bring on a huge amount of challenges when it comes to poor mental health. Just that simple approach of the monitoring approach that companies are taking.
Hands up if anybody else wanted to pitch in anything right now from the panel, but I'm going to move it probably back to Helen otherwise. I've not seen any hands up, so I'll go for this kind of next point, which would be, I'll start with you, Helen. I'll pick on you as our mental health in the workplace expert, which is really what you'd consider to be those key mental health considerations for remote working. So what the main challenges that you are seeing in what you're doing. We've all got the different aspect. I immediately think of all the physical before the mental, but actually they're linked. But if you wanted to just give us an idea of what you're seeing as the main sort of challenges from a mental health perspective.
Yeah, I suppose there's two challenges. The first one is, how do you look after people that have already got mental illnesses? People that have already got things like social anxiety, health anxiety, excessive concerns around cleanliness and illnesses and things like that. That's a real concern. People who have depression already, if you're further isolated from being able to carry out some of the interventions that usually would help you, having these types of lockdowns or enforced way of having to work and live will have a significant impact on already existing challenges. And the second theme I'm seeing is that more and more people are clearly struggling with having to work from home, having that isolation from friends and family, being worried about whether or not they're going to get unwell, whether their friends are going to get unwell, whether their family are going to be impacted by those things. People have experienced loss throughout this period. So there's a real eclectic mix of people who are coming from it at very, very different angles, and people who are having their own individual experiences. And with that, people are struggling to cope. People are struggling to find a way through it. And of course, that's not the case for everybody. There are some people who might be really thriving in this type of environment. So, I don't want to put it as all doom and gloom. But I think, for me, particularly, the rise in areas I'm working on is building resiliency, being able to build resiliency, recognizing that we're nowhere near the end of this. And the journey that we're on with COVID-19 is continuous, and we're going to have to continuously deal with different situations and different circumstances. I mean, a couple of months ago, we didn't think we'd go into local lockdowns, and then we went into local lockdowns, and certain parts of the country were being shut down. Now we're all being shut down. It's an ever-changing, uncertain beast, unfortunately, and being able to cope with those ever changes, I think, is really critical, and that's where businesses tend to be focusing right now, is trying to focus on building that resiliency and giving the tools to people to be able to manage their own sense of well-being and their own mental health.
I think as Kelly alluded to as well, that it's that employee engagement, engaging with the employees. Is that pretty much, hand in hand being one of the key way to manage this is being open and having that dialogue?
I think the most important thing that you can do is have a conversation with the people around you. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter what else you do. Yes, benefits are great. Yes, the interventions that you put in place, the workshops you put in place, absolutely are really, really relevant. But actually it's those conversations where you can spend some time with somebody asking how they are, and then asking again when they tell you they're fine, because we all know when we say fine, we're not really fine. Being able to reinforce that message and know that you have somebody that you can go to talk to, and that's not going to result in concerns around your career path, or implications on whether you get your pay salary. All of those types of stigma that we sometimes feel is in the workplace, is having that opportunity to have those conversations. And I think employee engagement is critical, because it helps to give you an indication on how engaged your employees are as part of that.
In terms of sort of think of employers, I was about to come to you, Sarah, from a self-employed perspective. How do you think, I mean, it's self-management, isn't it, with self-employed, but what are your thoughts on that from a self-employed perspective?
Yeah, very much. I really resonate with what Helen said just then about emotional resilience, because while I was researching survival skills for freelancers, that's something that I covered, because emotional resilience isn't something that you're born with or you're not born with. It's like a muscle. You can work on it. You can boost your emotional resilience. And I think certainly from a self-employed perspective, something that I think generally as a kind of a group of people, we are used to being dealing with the unpredictability. We are fairly resilient to change. We have to be. We never know when the next job is coming from in most cases. So I think on top of the pressure that exists for employees, there is also the added pressure for the self-employed of, well, does the pandemic mean that my clients are going to go under and I'm going to lose all my work? Where is the next job coming from? Kind of in a more kind of, can't think of the word, extreme version of that unpredictability than we're used to. And I think also certainly the lack of social interaction that we all face, employers and employees right now, it's really important to do even this kind of thing. We're seeing other faces on the screen, we are interacting with other people, and of course it's not the same as having that face-to-face interaction, particularly if you're used to working in an office or a co-working space. But it's still really important to kind of reach out through your own communities and, as Helen said, actually be open and honest about the fact that you are feeling this way, you are feeling anxious about what's going on in the world, because the more we open up and talk to others and we're honest about how we feel, the more we kind of build those connections and those meaningful relationships that are so important at this time.
Yeah, it's probably quite important at the moment to reach out to your self-employed friends as well, isn't it? And your self-employed colleagues who might be on their own.
More so than ever. And I think the communities that exist, Facebook groups, mastermind groups, Slack chats, that sort of thing, they're so important right now, more than ever before.
Does anybody else want to jump in with their sort of thoughts on this? I can imagine we can all probably contribute a little bit. But does anybody want to, I see Jen, you've gone for it.
I was going to, yeah, I was just going to add in as well. I think about mental health in terms of employers helping employees, whether you're employed or you're self-employed. I think as a parent, my mental health took a real hit when we were homeschooling, but then also the impact all of this is having on the children. And lots of employers are starting to realise that their employees' wellbeing isn't just linked with what's going on in their day job and whether they can do their job, but actually the ramifications that this is having on their life, and trying to look after children, explain to children why they can't have play dates, why they can't go and see their grandparents, and all of those extra things are really impacting on people. So I think it's really starting to have a positive shift for employees, starting to see employees aren't just these people that come to their desk at 9 till 5, but actually they're, so that's a small part of their world, and they're really starting to pay attention to everything else that's going on, whether you're a parent, whether you're a carer, whether you've got any ill health concerns as well. So I definitely have started to notice that shift since lockdown 1 and lockdown 2 has happened.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope they're long-term effects as well, because it's a forced thing, but it's going to really open up doors. Businesses are working very differently already, aren't they? And it's been forced, yes, but they've probably seen the benefits and that they can do something they probably previously felt they couldn't do. So, I mean, Kelly, you're probably seeing your clients maybe even coming to you for quite a lot of advice at the moment about that the changes.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the forced changes are now, here to stay, at least some of them. And I think just picking up on some of the points that Helen and Jen made there, it is really important to ask to people what they've got going on, and like I say, not just from a work point of view. And I think by fostering a culture where you are having regular chats and building that relationship with your employees, then they are more likely to turn around and let you know what they're struggling with or when they need help without fear of potential repercussion on them. But yeah, we are definitely seeing businesses making changes in terms to their structures, to their ways of working, more flexibility, etc. So I do think those things will definitely stay past the pandemic.
And Ben, are you, very good timing to be releasing an interactive wellbeing, employee wellbeing app, I've got to say. But are you finding that this is really linking in with what you're seeing and the conversations you're having with businesses that want a sort of digital solution, remote solution for their employees?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, let's be honest about the whole term well-being, because I know this sounds a bit blasé, but all of us in this room know that 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, if we went and spoke to a potential corporate client, we use the word well-being, we're looked at a little bit bohemian, and they get this kind of glazed over look on their face straight away. And now I'm not knocking on doors, people are knocking on our doors, which is great, but they're doing it because they realise that they've got to take their previous misconceptions and reinvent them in a new technological world. So yeah, I mean, version 2 comes out, which is great timing for us, but the whole premise is worldwide. I think companies are starting to realise, they're starting to resonate, and they're realising that engagement comes from conversation. And if they can't have that conversation physically, then they have to find a solution to have that conversation somehow. Like everyone on this panel, Helen, and everyone's already said, that conversation is super, super important, and they're finding new and better ways to do it. I mean, there was a company I saw the other day in Singapore that are doing all of their one-to-one and all of their progress meetings with their management team via virtual reality. And that sounds absolutely staggering to some of us, doesn't it? But I bet in a couple of years that's going to be a lot more commonplace than you'd probably think. And it's going to look a bit Steven Spielberg, but it's got its place, doesn't it?
Amazing. I'll have to give myself a virtual one-to-one at some point then, I think. Tara, I'm really interested to hear what you think about, sort of managing mental health of your employees, because I know that you've had to manage your hands-on staff who are in the clinic. You've had to manage your furloughing some staff and having some staff working from home as well. So you've had a real mixture of challenges there. And from a mental health perspective, I guess I'm pretty confident you'll be going to be having these conversations with your guys.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. It's also been, for me, it's taught me how resilient my team are. It's taught me a lot about communication. I think it boils down to communication. And I think when you're behind a screen, it's hard not to micromanage if you're company director like me. I find it quite a challenge, and I've had to really adapt to that. But majority of my staff are now back in. We run quite a tight kind of COVID-free environment, but it's about managing their expectations. Their mental health has been a big part of that. A couple of my staff have actually come to me, and we've had to go through a few discussions of how safe they feel. They've also had personal issues going on where they've had family members who are self-isolating, so managing all that kind of stuff as well. And then maybe just kind of fine-tuning that communication, that is, I found, the most important. But yeah, it's definitely highlighted people's lives a bit more. You're certainly more aware of your employees' well-being. I think the communication is definitely improved. People are having much more honest conversations. Mental health still has this kind of taboo around it a little bit, and I'm finding that that wall is breaking down now. So as a team, I think it helps to have that communication going, and has definitely brought us together as a team more stronger, actually. So mixed bag here.
I think it's really good to hear that there are a lot of positives, and the way that, say, it is becoming more comfortable conversation to talk about mental health. You say those walls are coming down, and I think this is all, I'm leaning towards it being a positive thing. I mean, nobody wants a global pandemic, but things are changing, and there are a lot of positives come out of this, but obviously only where it's managed right, which isn't necessarily happening all the time. Does anybody else want to add into that with really regards to mental health, or on any point that anybody's mentioned so far? or shall I push on to what I really want to talk about now? Joking, it's all really, really important, and it was all very, very much linked. But did anybody raise your hand if you want to jump in? Okay, cool. So we're going to go down the route of physical health. So mental health, physical health are obviously linked. So we're not, passing mental health now and talking about physical health. There's obviously a link there, very, very directly. Take it from a Pilates instructor who needs Pilates to manage pain, yet hasn't done a Pilates session himself since before lockdown 1, and is therefore suffering a little bit because of that. Mainly because I just can't get to a session that I can switch off and just do. So I'm really, really kind of aware of this, and it does affect mental health as well. But I'll start. Ben, I'm going to pick on you again because you're next to me. You were a PT. You've launched the Wellbeing app, which has got some brilliant Pilates content on it, I've got to say. Did you want to jump in on some physical thoughts around physical health, managing physical health, and how employees can sort of manage that?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, like Russ has already alluded to, in a previous life, I worked for a private healthcare company, Nuffield Health, and I did PT, and I own a gym and all this other stuff. But actually, I think the physical health, we've always kind of known that there's an elephant in the room, which is that inactivity leads to a multitude of problems, like Russ has already said. But actually, as employers, we've been dubious of getting too involved into a sector which we deem potentially can have a lot of backlash if we get it wrong. And I think employers are really willing to have a conversation now about actually what can we do, which is great. And Russ has always said we've got a really, he's fairly good, really good Pilates instructor that does some content on our app. And the most viewed Pilates video actually by this guy Russ last month was one that we put on specifically for people that had driving jobs. So actually I found that really interesting, that a sector that previously not putting too much of a stereotype on it, but actually they were run and gun, long days, long hours behind the wheel, and probably wouldn't have thought to take the time away to do something proactive about their physical well-being. Now they're doing it, and actually they've got all the guys in the depot that we look after, they all use the app every single day, and they think that actually it's made probably a bigger difference than anything they've done before. Whether that's all down to you, Russ, I don't know, but yeah, they've enjoyed it.
I really wish I'd thought of Pilates for lorry drivers in the past. That would have been a really good idea, actually. Sarah, so you've unmuted. Did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, first of all, that just sounds amazing. That's such interesting feedback that sector of the community are kind of looking to improve, because I do agree with all of Russ's kind of messaging about having a sedentary lifestyle is going to lead to bigger problems, and basically inactivity and a lack of physical health and a lack of physical activity can actually lead to mental health issues. So the two are very much connected. And I actually think from the perspective of everybody finding themselves in lockdown, we all kind of know that we should be doing a certain amount of exercise day to day. But when you are, particularly if you're employed, you're working in an office 9 to 5, you're having to fit your exercise in around your working hours. So you might be having to get to the gym at 7:30 in the morning and then drive straight to the office afterwards. Or you might be kind of fighting to get a gym session in together with kind of cooking tea for the family in the evening. So what's actually nice about the lockdown scenario we find ourselves in, and a real positive, is that we can take a break in our day around when we're productive and around what time suits us to take a break and what time suits us to exercise. So I actually think that that's a real positive. And I don't know whether you guys on the call today have seen, did you see the Emma? Does anybody nod if you know what I'm talking about? There's Fellows, the office furniture company, commissioned futurists to put together a kind of a model of what the future worker would look like if we carried on in this way, hunched over our laptop every day, barely moving, barely getting up from your desk, no natural light, bloodshot eyes, and it's quite horrific. If you Google it, put Fellows Emma, it'll come up. It's like it's basically a computer generated kind of image of this sort of hunched over lady with a pot belly and varicose veins, and it's quite horrific. So if anything is a powerful image to get us all to start thinking about remembering to build regular exercise into the mini breaks that we have during our day, that would be it. Have you seen it, Russ?
No, and I'll be immediately looking at that because that's going to sound quite useful for me.
For sure.
But I'll have a look at that, definitely. And Tara, obviously this is going to be a major thing for you. You're going to be directly seeing the links between people that are sat down a lot with back pain and things like that, and probably the impact on their mental health as well. So what are your thoughts around that, having probably been quite hands-on with these people?
So it was really interesting for me because pre-lockdown, I thought that we were probably going to be the most sedentary we've ever been. I didn't think we would actually be able to become more sedentary, and actually we are. So, you know, back pain is the leading cause of disability and off work in the world and in the UK. And from a business perspective, it's a nightmare having people off all the time. And the nature of back pain is that it is so recurrent. You know, over 80% of back pain will happen again. And we're seeing the age groups that people are developing back pain is actually lowering. So in clinic for me as well, I'm seeing people who are in their 20s and 30s suffering from real acute debilitating back pain and neck pain, actually, to put that in as well, because that's also on the rise. And it is purely because we are more sedentary than ever, and with lockdown we're even worse than we ever thought we were. So yeah, we need to stand up and move. And what I've seen is that it's working from home, it splits people into two, like the really self-motivated, you know, the people who were already really active, who had self-awareness, who had good gym routines, they were a lot quicker to pick up and be self-motivated and maintaining mobility. Those who've never really had a lot of drive, who've really not seen the importance, they've actually gone that level deeper and become even more sedentary. So it's, again, a real mixed bag. One positive I would say is that people are definitely more aware that there is a lot more self-awareness and there's a lot more ownership. People can't put the ownership on, I need to go to the gym. That element has been taken away from it. So that self-motivation is definitely, I think, improved since lockdown. So yeah, real mixed, and I think we are yet to see the impact, but the starting research is not so good. It is proving that we are going to be seeing a big increase in musculoskeletal complaints, which are going to be affecting employees and employers big time, financially and well-being mentally.
My spacebar just suddenly decided to do, oh, I know why, I've got the chat open, that's why. I was pressing spacebar, I wasn't unmuting. So I think I looked recently at the TUC stats, and it's £5 billion a year UK businesses lose just through 4.9 million days of absenteeism from work-related low back pain. That isn't just sedentary, that is also obviously manual handling as well. But that's a huge number just from low back pain, before you even consider the mental health implications and the other implications that come along with it. Did anybody else want to weigh in on what, on particularly focus around the physical health? I mean, it's very difficult to manage this as an employer, I'd imagine, not being an employer, but I mean, how do you say kind of to you, come on, you need to do some exercise? You know, that you can get into trouble for a start, you know, saying that sort of thing, but if you don't do it in the right way. But there are obviously right ways to encourage your employees as well, like Ben's solution, for example. Kelly, I see you want to jump in.
Yeah. Yep. I think, again, it feeds into those conversations that you're having with your employees. And I was talking to a client the other day, and he did notice that, you know, they were spending a lot of time, you know, online logged on, because it's, you know, especially, you know, working from home, you have a computer there, it's just so easy to just continue working past 5 o'clock or jump back on later on. So he is having those conversations about the importance of actually logging off and, you know, going out, getting some fresh air, doing some physical exercise. And now they've, as part of their sort of wellbeing initiatives that they do internally, they are encouraging by doing some sort of challenge where they have to get so many steps in or run so many miles. So you can kind of get the team involved, I think, that way, by being, you know, encouraging and try and put a positive spin on it and doing it as something that's a challenge, rather than saying, you know, stop being lazy, get outside. So I think employers can still have those conversations, because I think, you know, just following on from, you know, what Tara was saying, if they don't, the implications on the business are going to be huge, because they are then going to be losing employees, like for absence, through obviously not being able to be at work due to obviously, you know, back pain, etc. So I think you can definitely do it in a positive way as an employer and encourage it.
Jen, I see what you also wanted to, you've got obviously, physical health very, very much linked with diet, and diets are changing as well because we're all stuck at home. Maybe we're snacking a little bit more than we should be, and that, I know I am. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of the physical well-being, I obviously come at it not just from movement, but in terms of the nutrition. And I know with lockdown 1, there were all these people that were either trying to get out and get more active and lose weight and get really healthy, and there were the other group that seemed to not want to leave their sofas and get out of their pajamas. In terms of like the physical health, it really does link with emotional well-being as well. And I won't go into it too much because I will bore everybody, I'm sure. But if we think about what food we put into our body, it really can impact whether we're producing lots of serotonin and endorphins and dopamine, which motivate us. And when we're stuck working from home and feeling isolated, if we can fuel our body in the right way, it really can start to lift your mood and your emotion and really start to improve sleep. And lots of companies now have really started to see that nutrition especially isn't some fad diet where you're recommending people do really crazy things, but lots of them are really starting to do lots of lunch and learns where they can then go and do like little team challenges about food together, where they're moving away from the coffee and the sugar and they're thinking more about, helping employees get more B vitamins and magnesium. And they really are starting to see a really big return on investment in terms of employees feeling more engaged. But then from an employee's point of view, they're not having those energy dips in the afternoon or trouble sleeping, which just feeds more into those negative feelings of feeling low, feeling down, feeling tired. So I'm seeing it, the physical bit, slightly differently, but lots of positives that are coming out of this and people becoming more aware of what they can do to physically support themselves, but also emotionally support themselves through really simple nutritional changes.
Diet's a really hard one for employers to manage as well, whether you're in the office or out of the office. I mean, you can take away the tuck shop and whatever else, can't you? And maybe start to introduce some healthier snacks, or at least the options, but really, really tough one to manage. And Helen, what you, I mean, do you see much with the sort of physical mental health interlinked in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think so often the case is that there's this idea of a clear distinction between the mind and the body. And particularly when we're considering mental health and physical health, I don't think the two can be thought of separately. Poor physical health can ultimately lead to increase of developing things like mental health problems, but similarly, poor mental health can impact on physical health and lead to risk in some conditions, like coronary heart disease and things like that, can be a real concern. And I think there's some studies that show that depression has often been associated with things like an increased risk of coronary heart disease because of the impact that it has on reducing your physical exercise and activity. I think, employers have a duty of care and a responsibility to promote healthy lifestyles, to promote choices in terms of physical activity, to encourage their employees to be moving more, to be creating spaces and desk spaces that are complementary of reducing things like lower back pain, problems with walking, problems with sitting, all of those types of challenges that we face when we're particularly in a space for a long period of time. And I think they have that duty of care to be able to promote that. Of course, it always comes down to the individual, but if we're encouraging people to do it and we're promoting it and trying to enable those opportunities, and I think it was Sarah that mentioned, working from home, actually, does that mean that you have more time to focus on your physical activity? And of course, lockdown 1, we had PE with Joe Wicks, didn't we, every single day that seemed to take the nation by storm, and that was encouraging more people to get physically active. I wonder whether the lockdown 2, people have reflected on how things went on lockdown 1 and whether or not they've changed their habits, particularly when it comes to things like physical activity or even nutrition, and perhaps not reaching so heavily, so quickly for the cookie jar or the bottle of wine every night. Maybe people are making different decisions because there was more of an idea of how it impacted them in the first time round, but also we had a more idea that we were actually going into it. We had prior warning this time that we were going to go into a month's lockdown, and I wonder whether that's shifted people's perspectives on how much they do from a physical activity and from a nutrition perspective.
Yeah, I think what I have noticed myself, and from a few conversations I had with clients and previous clients, is as soon as the second lockdown was announced, I had a load of people come flooding back, but there's a few missing. And the few missing that I've spoken to, like, you know, it's a month, I'm just going to muddle through, because they feel like it's not such a long period. It's not, or not so open-ended. I mean, maybe more for them, who knows what's really going to happen, but, you know, with any luck, it is going to be, you know, what it appears to be. But I definitely finding that people think it's a short period of time and maybe less reactive to that. With what Helen said there as well, and Tara, with stress, and we're talking about mental health, physical health being interlinked, you might be able to shed a little bit of light on the link between back pain and stress, and neck pain and stress, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, most definitely, because well, as humans, we're not really designed to deal with uncertainty. So it really, without going into too much science, it's all about the nervous system and how we all respond to threat. So we're designed to deal with very acute stress because our body knows what to do with it. But when there's this low grade, constant, chronic level of stress, it does turn our pain volume up, and it's incredibly linked. So if we're slightly low, we haven't slept very well, we haven't eaten well, our body is in a little bit of a stress mode, our pain volumes actually turn up. So a little niggle suddenly becomes this big acute injury, and then we're less likely to move, and the cycle still keeps going. So it's really important to have that sort of discussions early on, make sure that we're looking at people as a whole. We're not just focusing on one area, because if we do that, we are going to miss the little triggers, and it is much harder when we are in our own environment. So a lot of people see work as work and home as home, and the home is a rest space, whereas now we've got that interconnected. So more than ever, our mental and physical health is interlinked. So from an employee perspective, it's really important to almost step back and put yourself in your employees' shoes and kind of look at their world and see where their stress is coming from, and then little tips and things that you can kind of help in that perspective. But I don't think we can actually separate the physical and mental well-being, because as human beings, we're not designed that way, and our nervous system is just not designed to cope with the situation. And personally, I think lockdown 2 has been a lot easier because we know what to expect. We've adapted, we know we've done this before, we kind of preempt the hurdles, we're kind of au fait with Zoom, we know how to work it now. So, I think we will adapt and it will get easier, but we can definitely not separate the mental and physical well-being at all in anyone.
The beauty of this is when I obviously sent out a bit of a brief to the panelists, I actually did separate out physical and mental health, and I love the fact that they've just merged into one, really, which is really good and kind of speaks volumes in itself, doesn't it? So one thing that's come up quite a few times, obviously communication is one of the biggest things we've spoken about, engaging with employees, but at some point, and take it from someone who had to take responsibility for their own pain at one point, where does employer responsibility end, and where does employee, and this does link into your self-employed people as well, having to take responsibility for their own health and well-being, but really speaking, where does that employer responsibility end? Like, how much do employers really need to do, and where does it become the responsibility of an employee to think, I need to do something to change my situation? I mean, employers need to empower their employees to be able to do that by not having them on a Zoom call all day long and saying, no, you're having your lunch from this time to this time. Unless you have to do that, you can be a little bit more adaptable now and a little bit more flexible. So, has anyone got any thoughts on where does one end and the other begin? Anybody want to weigh in on that one? Oh.
Yeah, I will, Russ. I unmuted because I wanted to kind of go back to something that Tara and Helen had both touched on the last question, but no, that's fine. Well, it was just to do with the fact that if you are an employee, when you're going into the office, that brings a certain level of structure to your day that I think is something that is causing lots of mental health challenges for people who aren't used to working from home, and something that kind of plays into that from a productivity basis, and incorporates physical activity during your day, and also kind of circling back to what Helen said about routine. I think routine is really important to help you get through the working day at home. I was just going to mention it's worth people looking up a bit more about the Pomodoro technique. It's basically a tried and tested kind of productivity hack that breaks your day down into manageable chunks of time. So you do a 25-minute stint of focused activity, and then you have a 5-minute break, and then then you do 4 of those 25-minute sessions, and then you have a longer break after the 4th one. So one of the things that I often recommend is actually using those 5-minute breaks. It doesn't seem long, but if you kind of focus on getting up away from your desk, moving about, going downstairs, putting the kettle on, doing some stretches, or one of Russ's short Pilates routines away from your desk if you can, dance around the kitchen, whatever, stick the dishwasher on, all these things are helping you to build activity kind of naturally and in an organic way into your day. So yeah, that would be something that I'd recommend people look up. But yeah, very, very briefly, to address the point that Russ has just raised, from a self-employed perspective, we have no HR person, we have no designated mental health first aider or no well-being representative within our businesses. We have to stand forward and kind of represent for ourselves, and that's all the more reason why it's vitally important for self-employed people to recognise the need to prioritise their own mental health and physical health, Russ, and well-being.
Absolutely brilliant. Totally agree with you there. And sorry, I didn't realise you'd unmuted from previously. And that's one thing I guess I've not touched on yet, is the productivity, which is, you know, all employers want productive employees, and all employees or self-employed people want to be productive. And if you're struggling with mental health or physical health and poor nutrition and all of these things, like poor sleep, they're all going to impact your productivity. So the healthier, happier the workforce, the more productive, for sure. Kelly, I saw that you had unmuted as well.
Yeah, I think just touching on the point about, you know, whose responsibility is it? And I think it has to be a two-way thing. And I think, you know, anyone knows me knows that I harp on about employee engagement and the importance of communication, etc. I think if you are fostering this culture where, you know, a two-way feedback is, you know, is the norm, then those conversations will flow a lot more naturally. And I think, yes, you know, an employer has a duty of care to sort of have those conversations and make sure that their employees are well and, you know, have everything they need. And as I just touched on, Russ, you know, a huge element of engagement comes from obviously employees being productive, but through being motivated, supported, etc. But then there's also the point where employees need to be able to speak up, and obviously need to make sure there's an environment where they feel able to do that. But one thing I, you know, also when I'm doing one-to-ones with people, if you don't tell us how you're feeling or what's going on, then yes, we can make guesses at that, or we can, you know, make assumptions, but we don't really know. So I think it is down to the employee to obviously be speaking as well to their employer to say, I'm struggling with this, or, you know, I need help with this, just so that, you know, those conversations start. But again, that has to be then in a forum where they feel comfortable and able to do that. But I do think it does work on both sides.
Definitely, I think that comfort, feeling comfortable having those conversations is really important. And one of the things I talk about under normal circumstances, that I think that businesses should have walking meetings rather than all sat around a table. All sat around the table is more formal, and the walls come up a little bit. When you're walking, something about walking and talking brings down barriers, makes things feel a bit more casual, and helps people open up. So that's a real challenge at the moment, because, you know, a call or a Zoom, is it less or more formal than being sat around the table? So that's a really difficult one to manage as well, I guess. Just finding what works for everybody and encouraging that openness really is really important, and communication. Jen, jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I completely agree with what Kelly was saying about it needing to be a two-way thing in terms of the responsibility. It's really important that people speak up and don't be afraid to say, actually, I feel really shattered, I'm really struggling at the moment, and not be afraid to say they need to book out, you know, an extra hour at lunchtime some days if they're working much longer hours, because when you're remote working, people can't always see exactly what you've got on your plate or how many hours you're putting in. So you need to be much more vocal, because you're hid away, more from other people. In terms of productive time, it's absolutely true. Lots of people feel so much pressure to always be turning up and to be doing more and more. Britain's Healthiest Workplace Survey do really big surveys every year, and they did one last year on 85,000 employees, and it actually showed the average employee lost over 38 days productive time a year, either through absenteeism or presenteeism, where they were turning up because they felt they had to, because they didn't feel they could have that conversation. So I think in terms of both employees and employers looking after the individual, it really can improve productivity, as well as creating that trust that we talked about to begin with, where the manager or the employee trusts the employee, but likewise the employee trusts that they can speak to their employer and not have it held against them, or there be a question whether they can cope in the work that they're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Just a couple more points I want to get through, just brief ones really, before we really open up to everybody. But in terms of responsibility as well, one thing I think of is you do see a lot of these sit-stand desks and that sort of thing. And when used properly, Tara will agree they're a really good tool. They can also be used, you know, not in a great way. And I've already been stood up for too long, so I should really sit down, but I can't right now. So you know, there is an element of those tools been really, really useful. But if you've got a large workforce that's suddenly working from home, you can't afford to go and buy, especially given the uncertainty of the financial climate, a load of sit-stand desks and special chairs and everything else. And people can't necessarily fit them in their homes. And, you know, obviously we can wing it and make something, and prefab something up ourselves and that sort of thing. But, you know, there's that kind of level of, you know, who's responsible? You know, should the employee go and buy themselves something for working from home? Or if it's set up to work, then, you know, should the employer be responsible? I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts around that or not. Not a major point, but just one that I think is quite interesting because it's quite topical at the moment. Tara, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, that's my topic. I think it really boils down to education, to be honest. I think you can give your employees everything. You can give them the fanciest chairs, you can spend all the money, but if you don't actually educate them on the importance of mobility, you don't educate them on the importance of looking after their mental and physical well-being, they'll still sit in those chairs for 2-3 hours and they won't move. And it's not actually about the posture. People have this misconception. The recent research is it's all about mobility, and you know, you can have the most expensive chair. If you sit in it too long, you will get back pain. It's just kind of facts of life, unfortunately. So for me, it's all about education, and we see what I call weekend warriors. You know, people that sit down all day and then go out and do like a 5K run, or go and do a Joe Wicks workout, and then they're in pain and they're thinking, well, I've been exercising. So it's about, you know, it's about that education that, you know, you need to move often, you need to move more generally in your day, instead of doing, you know, a 0 to 5 where you're sat down and then you do bursts of exercise, because you will injure yourself. And then again, we're in that cycle of mental and physical well-being. So for me, it's not about what you give people in terms of equipment, it's about how they use it and the education that comes around it.
I absolutely love what you've just said there, because the title of my presentation for businesses is Sit Less, Move More. And I talk about DSE, your display screen equipment setup, and that is important, you know, if you are sat there for periods of time. But how important is DSE? The HSE might disagree with me at the moment, but it isn't important. You could be hunched over your laptop or sat perfectly, but if you sat there for too long, you're screwed either way. So that's in technical terms, my thoughts on that. I don't know if anybody else wanted to weigh on this, or we'll move on to just kind of the final point that I really wanted to bring up, which is kind of where businesses have had to react and still reacting to a primarily remote workforce in a lot of cases. Has anybody got any sort of real examples and advice about where they've seen this done well and where they've seen things that people just shouldn't be doing, like as I said, sticking their workforces on Zoom all day to keep an eye, and just really what people's thoughts are on that? So basically, businesses have and are still reacting to a primarily remote workforce. What does managing this well and not so well look like, with some practical examples if you've got any, and then we'll open up after this one.
I'm happy. So I think in terms of what works well, and I'll say it again, the communication thing, I think it's setting the expectation, you know, making sure that you're communicating, you know, with your team, but without micromanaging. I think it has to be a two-way relationship. There has to be trust there. And I think, you know, where we see it working well, especially with our clients, where there is that, so they might have, you know, like a quick huddle in the morning over Zoom, so everyone just sets up their priorities and shares, you know, what they're doing for the day, and then they go off and they're left to their devices to do it, obviously, but with the ability to check in if needed. And I think it's just also where it works well is when businesses are aware that, you know, sometimes people do get Zoom fatigue. People don't want to be online every day, all day. So, you know, making sure that you're taking that into consideration as well, maybe having a Zoom free day, or, you know, just picking up the phone sometimes when you have a chat. So we're not always thinking it has to be on Zoom. So I think, again, you know, as I said earlier, it's very much finding what works in sort of line with your culture, with your people, and adapting that as well to, you know, who you have in your team, and what works for one person might not work for something else. And I think now more than ever, managers are just going to have to be more aware that it is a changing feast, and, you know, as this changes or continues lockdown, and we are going to have to continue checking in and making changes to adapt, you know, with, you know, in line with our people and what they need.
So really, it's the ones that are doing it well are the ones that are communicating and getting stuck in, but not being overbearing, basically.
Yeah,
I guess, to some extent.
Yeah.
Jen, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the companies that I've seen that are doing it really well are the ones that are really taking it seriously and not just seeing it as this tick box, oh, we've heard the word well-being, let's quickly, I don't know, throw the odd meeting here and then we've sorted that bit out. And there's some companies that are actually now starting to give their employees a little well-being budget each month, where they can use that money to do something towards that person's well-being, but it has to be used towards a well-being activity, whether it's Pilates or whether it's a swimming classes, and we could go to those, or nutrition, anything along those lines. And one other company, when we heard about going into lockdown too, they've actually enforced all employees to have 1 day off work during this next 4 weeks as an enforced well-being day off. So there's some companies that are really understanding what pressure people are under, and actually to get the best out of people isn't a case of making them work harder and harder, but it's actually trying to give them that space that they need to rest and restore to then be able to come back to work. So I've started to see some really good examples of companies taking it seriously and really starting to shift their thoughts and how they're treating people.
It's great to hear so many positive reactions from businesses here, isn't it? And Helen, have you been working with companies where you've seen some really good, awesome, particularly really bad examples of how this is going?
Yeah, there's far too many bad ones, really, which is a real shame. But some of the positives are where companies are really placing importance on value and and creating a sense of belonging, because when we're in a work environment, that's what we want. That's what plays into, you know, how we feel about when we turn up to work, whether that's, you know, from our office or at home or from our sofa, or when we're actually in the office physically. So where companies are investing in making people feel like they are the number one priority, you know, recognizing that they might be struggling, being able to adapt to different circumstances as they arise. And, you know, people having to take their kids to school, some of which have changed so dramatically in different times in which they have to drop their kids off, and, you know, companies that are being able to adapt to those things and to recognize that those things are happening right now. And, you know, to Ben's point earlier, is really embracing technology and using technology in a new way to create this kind of virtual environment, this virtual workspace, and not just relying on Zoom as your core way of doing that, but really leveraging some of the benefits and some of the technology that goes in with that can really play into people's sense of worth and people's sense of value, and see that the business is investing in what matters to employees. And for me, that's where businesses are getting it right.
Brilliant. Ben, I guess, you know, in your opinion, a really good example of where employees are getting it right, or where they're buying your app for their employees. But have you got any other thoughts outside of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna plug it. Don't worry, I'm gonna resist that plug temptation. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I know statistics say world politics have taught us anything in the last year. It's that stats can be played with however we want. But I'm sure a lot of you guys saw the FSB stats last year, so I thought they were really interesting. There was one FSB survey that was done, and this was pre-first lockdown, and it was that 87% of employees thought that health and wellness offering was something that was paramount when they were choosing a job, but only 23% of UK businesses actually provided one. And now I thought it was really interesting that that's obviously a huge discrepancy, but last week the FSB have come out publicly and said, guess what, all our projections were completely wrong, we've changed everything, we've done another survey, and the 87% didn't change at all. It was literally something like 88, 89%, so a tiny little change on people that valued a health and wellbeing offering. But the percentage of businesses that were trying to do something has skyrocketed to 61. Now, I know that's a real positive, and we can take it as a real positive, but 61's not enough. And everyone on this call that's spoken to is going to agree. I'm sure 61% of UK business sounds a huge statistic, but actually, I mean, crikey, 39% of UK business is still ignoring it. And today is a great, example of people that aren't ignoring it, and examples of people that are being proactive. But there's still a lot of people that aren't. So we've got to reach those individuals. We've got to get them involved with things like this. We've got to open the dialogue to everybody in UK business, from one employee, self-employed, to the 5,000 mega corporations, because 39% of them still aren't doing it.
Every time I've got the chat box open, I hit spacebar and nothing happens. And then when I next chat, obviously I've got a long line before anything goes on. No, spot on there, Ben, and it's good. And it's good to see that it's improving. Needs to improve more quickly and stay improved as well. I think it's a really important thing. Does anybody want to contribute further to that one from the panel? If anybody else wanted to go in on anything there, or should we just open up to the last remaining few people we've got in the meeting to ask any questions or to weigh in their thoughts?
Anyone's got any questions? Can they put their hand up? Anyone got any questions? There hasn't been anything on the chat box. I think everyone's a few people have had to leave. Russell.
Now my spacebar's not working at all. Young people in technology should be all right, shouldn't they? I'm a youngster, 35, so I should be really good at this. So yeah, no, it's really good. I think we've had some good contribution in the chat box. So with some different thoughts about seasonal as well. I mean, last lockdown in a way was great, wasn't it? Because you could just go and sit anywhere, and you could be anywhere in the world. It was amazing weather, and it's a little bit different now, to say the least. I'm still trying to get out there myself, but hopefully it doesn't put too many people off. I don't know if anyone's got anything else they wanted to contribute to discussion, from any thoughts or questions at all. Christina, did you see your hand go up? Yeah, feel free to jump in.
Thank you. I'm really interested in what you guys think about new employees. So there are obviously still organizations who are employing people, and I'm just, as I said, curious to hear what you think about how do you introduce someone. It's not just about introducing them to the job and the tasks. It's about the culture and, making them feel at home and part of the team. And then also, of course, on the other side as well, what can a new employee do themselves to sort of get into the new organization very quickly. So yeah, just curious about what you think of that.
Who wants to jump in on that one? I think, Kelly, is that one probably close to your experience?
Yeah, happy to take that on. Yeah, absolutely, virtual onboarding can be difficult. We've actually done it at HR Start recently, had a new member of the team. I think, the principles of induction and onboarding remain the same in terms of trying to include that person from day one, share information without overloading. I think, like I say, all of that stays the same. A lot of that will obviously have to be done over Zoom as well. But I think also building in elements of that for them to be able to spend time, with other members of the team. And again, building in some of those sort of like lunchtime sessions where you're having like non-work chat. So you get to share, as a team, who you are as people from a social aspect, and find out a bit more about your new employees well. And I think it's about just in the information then you're sharing. So again, just don't make it all like task focused. Talk to them about, your culture, your brand, why you do what you do, etc. And just try and again communicate as much as possible. And maybe give them somebody within the team that can be like a buddy for them. So when they do have any questions, or like normally they've been in an office, and they'll just turn and talk to somebody that they know that's their go-to person, maybe rotate that within the team as well. So again, I think it's communication, but again, having some of those chats that are online that aren't focused on work all the time. So bringing a social element to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's the social element of it. I mean, it would be a very difficult place to be a new starter, I think, in a business at the moment. Really, really challenging. It's difficult enough being, as you say, an employee, an established employee in a business, and still doing that. And it's good to see that obviously with everything, the tools we've got to hand at the minute, we can actually still have a lot of those conversations. And I see from my other half that they seem to be having quite a lot of banter and a lot of these social conversations, and it's doing the world of good, I think, to be honest with you. So I think employers need to encourage that rather than some may be tempted to dissuade from that, mightn't they? And that would definitely be the wrong way. Does anybody else got any contribution at all, any questions at all? Or are we good? Are we pretty much there? Hannah, you look like you're about to unmute, but I might be wrong if I just
I wasn't, but I will now. I suppose my only thing is, as probably one of the only employees here, I do think I agree with everything you've said. It's been really interesting, and there's lots of stuff I'm going to take back to my line manager, because I do think it depends on your manager and how much importance they place on well-being, on exercise, on moving, those kinds of things. And I think if it's not a priority for them, it's very easy for them to not see that it might be a priority for their team members. My boss is wonderful, she's amazing, but would happily sit in a chair 24 hours a day. So when we the rest of the team kind of say, oh, should we do this, should we do this, she's like, no, I'm not interested. So it's quite hard, I think, at times trying to steer people towards that. Well, you might not want to, but you've got to see the value in us taking half an hour to go and do that for ourselves, or whatever it might be. So yeah, but yes, it's been amazing, really enjoyed this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, you're totally right. It's that bigger picture, isn't it? And I think sometimes middle-ish management can be a bit of a barrier, because their opinion can sway on it, and what gets filtered through, you know, it can be an issue in certain organisations. And I think the ones that are going to get it right are, you know, where every level of management are on board with, you know, the bigger picture, making sure they're looking after the employees' well-being, and, you know, every message gets through. I think that's really, really important. I guess from another perspective, Sarah, it's really difficult as self-employed, and you know, you've really got to just kind of manage it yourself and not go into a pit of despair.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, we're 100% responsible for making sure we do all of that ourselves. But then on the positive side, unlike Hannah, who has kind of a manager who's not really supportive, we have to support ourselves, and we can do that. So it must be frustrating being in that sort of environment when you understand and appreciate the values of keeping moving and getting moving, and it's not just physical and mental health that it improves, it's productivity. You can't be your best self and do your best work if you're not staying active and you're not looking after your mental health and physical health. So yeah,
I think we've all kind of commented in one way or another that whether self-employed or employed, you know, there have been big steps towards improving well-being and improving productivity. So I think I'm leaning towards it being, you know, it being a good thing, even if things go back to more of a balance. I think it's definitely started some wheels moving now that will really move the focus, won't it? So it's really, really good. Well, guys, if no one else has got anything to add, then thank you very much all for attending and for getting involved in the panel. Really appreciate it. It's been good to talk to you all. I've learned a lot, which has been nice. And so it wasn't too much of a car crash either, so that's always good. So yeah, thanks guys. Thank you very much. For anybody watching the pre-recorded, hope you enjoy it, and please feel free to reach out to any of us if you've got any further questions or anything.